comments after I signed off that Pam said we named a state park after him, a whole town after him, after Jean Lafitte. And it's true, we do. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about Jean Lafitte. And who knows if anybody can see this, but it'll be up on my Facebook page and people can see it later on. So I'm gonna just give him the full screen. Let's see. I'm gonna do it like that. Okay. So here is Jean Lafitte, and this is, like I said earlier, the evidence to me that he really didn't like sitting for a portrait, but who does? Because he was a tough guy. He wanted to be a pirate. He was out there doing his stuff. Like, hurry up and paint this damn picture. I got pirate stuff to do. And probably the most prominent thing that every visitor hears about Jean Lafitte in the French Quarter is probably a myth. And that, well, I'm almost certain that it's a myth. And that is that Jean Lafitte had a blacksmith shop at this shop right here. So Lafitte's blacksmith shop is one of these great old bars on Bourbon Street. Probably one of the oldest bars in the city, but it's still operating as a bar on the corner of Bourbon and St. Philip. And it's called Lafitte's Blacksmith Shop. And the legend is that Jean Lafitte, the pirate, had, oh, yay. Okay, Carla can see me. Carla, you are so faithful and wonderful that you keep coming back for these things. So Jean Lafitte, Lafitte's Blacksmith Shop on Bourbon Street, the legend behind it is that that was like his sort of money laundering scheme, like his cover profession for really that he was being a pirate. There's no evidence of that. There was at one time a blacksmith shop on that property, and Jean Lafitte and his brother did at various times live across the street from it. But Jean Lafitte didn't need a cover profession because he was openly a pirate. Everybody knew he was a pirate. It's not like he was like, oh, I'm just, a regular old blacksmith here working over the forge. Everyone knew he was a pirate because he was like a celebrity pirate. So the right across the street from it is Lafitte's Blacksmith Shop. And so right there again is, Lafitte's Blacksmith Shop. Across from it is what we call Lafitte Guest House. And it's a small hotel, and they actually have a bar in there now to take the overflow from the other bar. And that property, Pierre Lafitte, Jean Lafitte's older brother, did actually own a house on that property at that time. It's not that house. That house was built in 1848 by a banking family, but there was a small one-story structure on that property that Pierre Lafitte did own and lived there with his not wife, but the free woman of color that he had a long-term relationship with. So there's a little bit of truth. There was a blacksmith. They were the organized crime of the neighborhood, like the mob guys. So it's not beyond the scope of imagination to think that they ever walked in and were like, hey, blacksmith, take a walk around the corner. We got to talk some business here. So that may have happened, but it wasn't there. They weren't blacksmiths. So here is one of the many pictures of Jean Lafitte. Hardly any pictures remain that were made by people who actually knew Jean Lafitte. Hey, Stephanie, yay, we got more people on here. This is working, so excited. Yes, I think I'm going to renew after my 14-day trial period B.live. It makes it so much easier. All right. This is the only existing picture of Pierre Lafitte by anyone that knew him. It's a old grainy black and white photograph in a newspaper of a little miniature of Pierre Lafitte, and it looks like he has a long Santa Claus beard. I think that's supposed to be like his collar and the white shirt. Anyway, so Pierre Lafitte, and then this is their friend, possibly half brother, fellow pirate, fellow Baratarian, Dominique Yu. And again, probably a picture drawn by someone who never actually saw Dominique Yu, but I just love this picture of him because he looks like such a tough guy. And the three of them were buddies. Here is a picture that presumably was painted by someone who actually saw them, but they look freakish. I mean, their heads look gigantic. So I don't know what's going on there, but suffice it to say that they were definitely pirates. So a little background, Jean and Pierre were brothers. Jean was the younger brother of Pierre. Pierre was about 12 years older than Jean. The most reliable records say he was, they were probably half brothers, and Pierre Lafitte was 12 years older than Jean. And I think Jean really admired his older brother. He really looked up to his big brother. And so they were from Bordeaux in France. And just here's a little picture of sort of a farmer class family in France in the late 18th century, which would have been when he was growing up. And his older brother Pierre was already a man, you know, having adventures, and would come back and tell little Jean about it. And I just imagine that he was just thinking about all these great things that his brother was doing out in the world, and that one day and he and his big brother would go out there and they would be, you know, they would be on the seas together. And so, yeah, Pierre would tell stories, you know, the French Revolution and Haiti, Saint-Domingue, and about all the ships out there. And then eventually Jean was old enough and he left Bordeaux and he got to be pirates with his brother, which I'm sure was just such a big thrill to him. And I think it led his entire life, the desire to be, you know, an adventurer and a pirate with probably his favorite person in the world. So eventually 1803 is this monumental moment where Louisiana becomes American because of the Louisiana Purchase. So to refresh your memory, Thomas Jefferson was the president of the United States, and he arranges with Napoleon of France to purchase this entire territory right here, which is massive, massive territory. And he goes on, and we become American. So New Orleans, which is at the tip down here, and did not really like the idea of becoming American. Like, the people in Louisiana didn't fight and die for their right to be an independent free nation. It was just told to them, hey, guess what? You're American. So they really resisted it. So the people that were here, they were still speaking French. They were Catholic. They didn't want to become American. They really thought of themselves as an entirely different culture. And it's kind of where the term Creole starts to emerge, as them calling themselves Creole. It's a word that existed for a long time, but I think they began to refer themselves as Creole as opposed to the newcomers, les Américains, or the Americans. But where the pirates come in is that the United States was this brand new struggling country with not a uniform military, not a lot of money in the treasury. They didn't really have the means and the resources and the manpower to come down to Louisiana and like enforce American rule, to just say, all right, we're in charge. And they just didn't have the resources. They really just couldn't feed everyone. But the pirates could, and the pirates filled in that gap, and they were just capturing, they were flying different flags of different countries, and they were out there capturing ships from all over the world, taking all their stolen goods and bringing them into these port cities and selling them at 100% profit. And New Orleans was just ripe for that because A, we wanted our stuff and we couldn't get it. And B, they were French, and the people here didn't want to become Americans. They were like, oh, look at these cool French guys walking around selling this stuff that we want at rock bottom prices. And of course, the pirates are not like being discreet about it. No pirate was ever discreet, especially these guys. And New Orleans was a thriving port city. Look at all the ships right here at the Crescent in New Orleans. And they were like walking down Royal Street in the middle of the day with signs like selling my stolen goods at rock bottom prices, really flaunting it to the Americans. And so eventually in 1814, 1812, the War of 1812 begins. And that's, to refresh your memory, the British versus the Americans, the British feeling like they gave up too easily during the American Revolution, and they kind of want to take the whole thing back. So they want New Orleans. It's a jewel. Whoever controls this rapidly growing city controls all the trade up and down the Mississippi River. So they want New Orleans. The British have their eyes set on it. And this is, just the depiction of the War of 1812, the British versus the Americans. And a lot of it was fought by sea. They went for all the American port cities, Baltimore, all along the East Coast and down. Hey, Marty! And down into New Orleans. So the British have their eyes set on New Orleans. They want to take New Orleans. And in 1814, so first of all, they're fighting the war, but then in New Orleans, the city that they know the British want to take, the pirates are walking around flaunting organized crime all over the place. So the Americans decide, all right, we're going to go in and show these pirates who's boss. Okay, we're going to, plus we can use some of their ships and their ammunition and all the cannons and stuff. So they go in and they raid the pirate stronghold. The pirates called themselves the Baratarians, and Jean and Pierre were really kind of like the leaders of this group. And the Americans find out where they are, and they go in and they raid and they take about a dozen pirates out of about 80 that were there, take about a dozen pirates prisoner, take hundreds of cannons, lots and lots of ammunition for the American side. So now Pierre and Dominique are in jail, but Jean got away. So Jean is a free man, but he's worried about his brother because it's his big brother who he loves. I think he's motivated by his adoration of his brother for his entire, I don't want to psychoanalyze Jean Lafitte, but he loved his brother, and his brother was not well. He had had a stroke. He was in jail. And so he's very worried about it. And it's actually here is the jail where this is where Pierre was held. This is now called the Cabildo, the Louisiana State Museum. But at the time, it was just the government body for the government building for everything. So it was the courthouse and the police station and the jail, and they hang people in the square. And, you know, so this was kind of like the man over there. So anyway, that is where Pierre was held prisoner. And then Jean, in the meantime, was out at see if this does this go through. We'll be able to look at that. No, I don't think we'll be able to. I'm just going to share another screen with us. So I'm going to go back, close that. All right. And I'm going to show you where Grand Isle is. So in relation to New Orleans, which is up here, and this is a modern like Google map. And so you can see that in between New Orleans and Grand Isle, there is a lot of swampy, marshy waterway. Even today, if you want to go to Grand Isle, even though as the crow flies, it's, I don't know, 30, 40 miles, it's like a couple of hours to get all the way down there because you have to go these little waterways. So at the time, it's pretty remote. It's way out there. It's a barrier island off of Louisiana. And Pierre Lafitte is at Grand Isle, and he's very, very, very worried about his brother. So anyway, in the meantime, and let's see, this is what Grand Isle looks like today. So it's just this little barrier island, and you can go out there and spend the day on the beach. It's really nice. I love it. But this is the map that the British were looking at. And it's hard for me to see because I'm making it very small here. But you can see that this is basically what they're looking at going to New Orleans. So they have their sights set on New Orleans, and they can see clearly that it's surrounded by water on all sides. And right here, it actually says shallow water covered with many small islands, which are but very little known. So they're like, oh, how are we ever going to make a surprise attack? They're like, if only we could think of somebody who had like a deep, detailed knowledge of these swampy back waterways, we could make a surprise attack on the Americans. So someone speaks up and says, sir, to the captain, there's a pirate on that island over there, and he's wanted by the Americans. So maybe you could work a deal with that guy. So they actually go on to land, and let's see, he is Colonel Edward Nichols of the British Royal Navy, goes onto the island. And according to the legend, the pirates were kind of always lying about it. They had several winches around, and they were laying under the oaks and drinking lots of rum, like very, very piratey. And so here's a depiction of it from an old story about Jean Lafitte. And the captain says to Jean Lafitte, hey, we need your help to make a surprise attack on the Americans. And we're going to make it worth your while. Like, if you help us, we will give you and your men land holdings in the British Empire. And I might add, if you don't help us, we're going to come in and wipe out your little nest of pirates, because obviously we know exactly where you are. So Jean Lafitte is wily. Jean Lafitte says, yeah. It's not beyond the scope to think that a pirate is going to help you do something, because this pirate, he was an opportunist. He was a criminal. He was if the Americans hadn't had something he wanted, he would have been on the British side in a heartbeat. So what he does, oh yeah, totally, I'm on board. Give me 2 weeks. I got to get my guys together and thing. All right. Nice to meet you. So the captain leaves, and Jean Lafitte sends word for his lawyer, and his lawyer brings the paperwork that the British had given him with the royal seal on it and everything, brings it to General Andrew Jackson and W.C.C. Claiborne, the mayor, the governor of Louisiana. And he says, look, this is my client got this offer, but he will go on your side if you let his brother out of jail. That's all he wants. He's just a good brother, right? And so, of course, General Andrew Jackson, old Hickory, he said, no, we don't negotiate with pirates. He called him hellish banditti, and I'll be dead before I negotiate with this guy. But that night, the gate of the Cabildo, that green gate that we saw, was accidentally left open by the jail keeper, and Pierre just booked it down that alley all the way home. So the General Jackson goes to the lawyer, and he says, "Is your client happy?" And he says, "No, my client's not happy. He needs to know that he's going to walk the streets of New Orleans without getting arrested. In fact, all 80 of them are now my clients." Yes. And all 80 of them want complete amnesty for all the crimes for which they're wanted. And Jackson got it. He secured a presidential pardon for all the Barratarians, complete clean slate. No more longer wanted for any other crimes. And the pirates agreed to fight in the Battle of New Orleans. So they were there at varying degrees. I have to admit, not all of them were on the front lines, but they put their men there. Dominique Yu was definitely manning one of the cannons. And then here's the picture of, the pirates. Pirates always have bandanas, right? It's as if there was, COVID-19 or something. So the pirates fighting at the battle, famous picture of the pirates fighting at the battle. And so, of course, I would like to say they all went straight, lived happily ever after, married nice girls and settled down. But once a pirate, always a pirate. Within a couple of years, they were back on the most wanted list. Jean, actually, as the best description of what happened to him is that he went down in a battle and he was buried at sea in the Gulf of Mexico. Pierre died on land, and he's buried at a small cemetery at this church, also in Mexico. So their legend lives on. Oh, Dominique Yu. We visit Dominique Yu's tomb on our cemeteries tour when we go into St. Louis Cemetery number 2. And we will be doing that again very soon, I'm sure. Eventually, we will do it again, no matter how long it takes. And Lafitte Greenway, which used to be the Carondelet Canal, the old Basin Canal, which is now a beautiful park that people walk their dogs and ride their bikes and drink beer and all that fun stuff. Pirates Alley, where that jail was, is named after our legend of pirates. And tour guides will tell you the pirates used to hang out in that alley. I don't think they were hanging out in the alley. I don't know why a bunch of criminals would hang out between, the church and the jail, but it's named after the pirates. Jean Lafitte National Historical Park. So our entire national park, which I'm sorry Pam didn't get to see this because she did mention that we've named a park after this criminal, but we love him. And the Chalmette Battlefield is also part of the Jean Lafitte National Historical Park, which is a really, really cool place to visit. And is a great cemetery as well. And a whole town of Jean Lafitte. So anyway, that's some stories about Jean Lafitte. And I'm going to turn myself to the main. All right. How did you like the pictures and stories of Jean Lafitte? How'd you like it, Bill? Yay! All right. I'm subliminally training them to be tour guides. Anyway, thanks everybody for tuning in. I think I'm going to be telling more stories about this. Please get to me on Facebook or otherwise and tell me the stories that you'd like to hear, because odds are that I'm definitely going to want to tell them. Thank you. Goodbye. Stay safe.